What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing, back at you again. Today's topic: does anyone remember the pay-per-view numbers of Hagler and Hearns, or Leonard and Duran, or Ali and Frazier, or do you just remember the winner of the fight? Let's chop it up and see what it's all about.
Got the money for minutes, pretty bitch, gotta show me titties. This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? That life before riches, huh? That life before riches, huh? Pretty bitch, show me titties, huh? And I got the glazy run up on me, I'ma make you get it. I'ma make you get it.
Okay, boxing fans, let's talk some boxing today. All right, so, there's a lot of talk about pay-per-view numbers when it comes to the fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, if that fight ever was to happen. I mean, if we leave it up to Spence, that fight would never happen. Okay, but let's talk about these so-called pay-per-view numbers and, this so-called heavy lifting that Errol Spence is supposed to be doing. I mean, at the end of the day, when we pull up a fight, like, for example, the Leonard and Duran fight, do we look for the pay-per-view numbers? Do we check the pay-per-view numbers of Duran or of Leonard or of Hagler? Have any of you ever done that to see who was the bigger champion? Is that what is that what determines who's the best fighter is? Do we care about their pay-per-view numbers? Or do we just care about the fact that they fought? I mean, if I put up the fight between Hagler and Mugabe, I'm not looking at them. I don't care about the pay-per-view numbers. I could care less. What does it have to do with anything? What about Leonard and Duran? Do I care about their pay-per-view numbers? No. Nobody looks up pay-per-view numbers of these classic fights. We don't go looking for the pay-per-view numbers. We look at the fighters, their record, and who they fought. We could care less about pay-per-view numbers. But today you have these fans and these fanboys out there talking about Errol Spence has the bigger numbers. I mean, it's ridiculous at this point. I mean, the lens that these people go to not make the fight between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford happen. Okay, so we got Blue Blood Sports over there. Oh, Leonard Spence had the bigger numbers. He got the bigger numbers. Yeah, he had the bigger numbers. It's not even close. It's not even close. This is what this guy's over there talking about all day long on his channel. While he's racking up super chats from his delusional fans. Who's like sitting there listening to him like they're in church. Okay? Who got the bigger numbers? Spence got the bigger numbers. He's a big fish. He's a big fish. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, at the end of the day, man, nobody really cares about pay-per-view numbers. Okay? When this fight go down in history, pay-per-view numbers are not going to be what people are talking about, okay? What people are going to be talking about if this fight don't happen between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford is that, Errol Spence ducked Crawford. That's what they're going to be talking about, okay? And if they do actually fight, they're going to talk about how the fight went, who won, and who these guys fought. They're not going to be talking about their pay-per-view numbers. Who cares? So, but at the end of the day, I guess, that's what these guys have nothing else to talk about, okay? When you look at the record of Spence and Crawford, you can see the difference. All this talk about pay-per-view numbers, is not going to make the fight happen, okay? This fight needs to happen to see which one of these guys is the best. Nobody cares about whose pay-per-view number is the best. Okay? But it looks like these Spence fans don't want this fight to happen. I look at the different energy that they have, and that even Errol Spence have for the Ugas fight. that's supposed to be coming up next. We don't know, but we'll see. Then he in for Crawford. You don't hear anything about 60-40 with Ugas. You don't hear anything about who got the biggest pay-per-view numbers with Ugas. You don't hear anything about who's, the heavy lifting, that Spence is doing the heavy lifting with Ugas. You don't hear anything about 70-30. All you hear is that let's make the fight. So why couldn't Spence keep that same energy with Crawford that he's keeping with Ugas? Where's the energy for the fight with Crawford that you see for Ugas? And what's the difference? Why is the energy so different? This is what I'd like to know. And I'm sure a lot of people out there would like to know the same, asking the same questions. It's a whole different energy, people. So again, these guys are out there going around to say because Crawford is saying that he's not taking 60-40, he's ducking. When he's been chasing Spence for 3 years. How are you ducking when you're chasing a guy for 3 years and the guy's coming up with all kind of excuses, and the latest excuse he's coming up with is 60-40? Okay, first was outside the street. Now it's 60-40. Then he doing the heavy lifting. Then there was Crawford have to leave the top ranked and come to PBC for the fight to happen. I mean, excuse after excuse after excuse. At this point, people, people have to recognize what's really going on. Okay? All of a sudden now it's strap season again. Strap season done come out of hiding. We couldn't hear nothing about strap season when we was talking about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford fighting. Nothing about strap season. But all of a sudden, strap season is strap season now with Ugas. No 60-40 with Ugas. No other side of the street. Well, there's no other side of the street. They're both on PBC. But, none of the excuses that he was using for Crawford are we seeing now with Ugas. Okay? So, I'm interested to see if, he's going to be talking 60-40 with Ugas. I don't hear none of the fans talking about that. I don't hear none of the commentators saying Ugas going to have to take 40%. And then these LDBC fanboys, I don't hear them saying that Ugas must take 40% for the fight to happen, or he must take 30%. They don't talk about that at all. But I'm talking about it. I'm going to ask. I want to know. I want people to comment and tell me, is Errol Spence going to offer Ugas 40%? Is that what he's going to offer to fight Ugas? And is Ugas going to take that? So, we're going to see how this is going to shape out. But again, we're not hearing Errol Spence negotiating in the media like he was doing with Crawford. Okay, throwing up roadblocks to the fight like he was doing with Crawford. He called Ugas and said, let's make the fight. He didn't say, Ugas, we're going to make the fight, but you're going to have to take 60-40. He didn't say that. I wonder why. Because he wants to fight with Ugas. You see how quick he agreed to fight Ugas. And, the funny thing about this whole thing is that he's not going to make the same money with Ugas that he's going to make with Crawford. That he could make with Crawford. No way close. But he's ready to fight Ugas. Okay? More than ready. But with Crawford, he's worried about suits telling him to fight and shut up and fight. Why don't the suits take a cut? Because more than likely what is going on is that the people of PBC is telling them, go ahead and take the fight with Crawford, man, and just, take 50-50. You don't have to be 60-40. You're still gonna make a lot of money. But he's talking about a pay cut. He's not taking any pay cuts. I mean, what pay cut? You're not getting a salary from Crawford. You guys are coming together and make a fight. And you're not going to make the same money with anybody else that you're going to make with Crawford. And that's just the facts. So if you can make the same kind of money with Crawford, say with Ugas, let's see. Are you going to make $20 million in the Ugas fight? No. But you can make $20 million in the Crawford fight. And why would you be able to make $20 million? Because you're fighting Crawford. Okay? Simple as that. So the guy that's going to bring you your biggest payday You want him to take a pay cut, and he's bringing you your biggest payday in your entire career. This type of talk that just simply does not make any business sense whatsoever. So if it doesn't make business, it doesn't make sense. And it definitely doesn't make business, because you want the guy that's bringing you your biggest payday to take less money. But there were people that you fought, Crawford, I mean, like Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter. It was okay to fight, to take 50-50 with them. You wasn't talking about a pay cut when you took 50-50 with Mikey Garcia. You wasn't talking about a pay cut when you took the same thing with Sean Porter. Okay, but now when it comes to Crawford, you're not taking a pay cut. So again, people, I mean, this is, I think, we've been going over this thing over and over again. And again, as we can see, the fact of the matter is, Errol Spence don't want to fight Terence Crawford. And, it is what it is. We can keep talking about it. We can keep saying, talking about all this nonsense. I mean, and at the end of the day, these guys out there talking about, he's the bigger fish. Spence is the big fish. The numbers don't lie. This Blue Blood Sports and, all these guys out there, the numbers don't lie. Who cares? I mean, who cares about the numbers? Okay? Nobody care about the numbers now with Ugas. They're not talking about the numbers with Ugas. You don't hear them saying that Errol Spence is the bigger fish, so Ugas got to take 30% or whatever Errol Spence decides to give him. We don't hear that. So I just don't understand what these guys have against Crawford. I mean, against Crawford. I mean, it's I mean, now we even hear them talking about Crawford is not a Hall of Famer. We got these Willie Lynch Negroes out there now, plantation Negroes out there now talking about Crawford is not a Hall of Famer. Is Crawford really a Hall of Famer? I mean, these guys are supposed to be, pro-black. I mean, this is what they claim, okay? They're pro-black. This is what they're out there, shouting to the world, where anybody that can hear them, oh, we're pro-black, LDBC, we're pro-black. But they're doing everything in their power to tear down a black man, Crawford, okay? Just to satisfy, their ego, just so that, just because they're right, they want to be fanboys of Errol Spence. They want to tear down Crawford's record now. Is he really a Hall of Famer? At the end of the day, it's a good thing that, Crawford going to the Hall of Fame don't depend on the LDBC, else he would never make it. Okay? They would have Errol Spence in the Hall of Fame instead of Crawford, even with all the accomplishment that Crawford has done. Okay? Thank God that Crawford going into the Hall of Fame don't depend on these Negroes. Okay? Thank God for that. Okay? And there's no doubt that he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Okay? So, I'm glad that they have nothing to do with it. Okay? These fools. So anyway, that's the new talk. Is Crawford really a Hall of Famer? He ain't fought no Hall of Famer, so how could he be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, these guys are delusional, man, But, these are the lengths that, this is what the Willie Lynch syndrome can do to people. You know what I mean? These black people out there who, suffering from post-slavery, stress or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what to call it. I mean, but, these guys, it's like they're still living on the plantation. They got the plantation mentality. Okay? Crabs in a barrel. They want to tear down Crawford, to be a fanboy of another fighter. I mean, it's ridiculous. So now let's just say that Errol Spence actually fights Ugas and he wins. I mean, and there's, even though he should win, Okay, I mean, he should win. You know, if we look at the paper, but we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day. Okay, now when he fought Mikey Garcia, it was supposed to be an easy fight. He was supposed to knock Mikey Garcia out, but that never happened. It went a distance. When he fought Sean Porter, he was supposed to knock out Sean Porter. It was supposed to be an easy fight, but we all saw what happened. Okay. Now he's supposed to beat Ugas, but we don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen, you know. And you know, while we're talking about him fighting Ugas, you know, and we're talking about records, you know, is Sean Porter a Hall of Famer? Danny Garcia? Maybe Mikey Garcia might be a Hall of Famer because he done, you know, he's been champion in more than one division. You know, I mean, I don't know if Danny Garcia is going to become a Hall of Famer. He was at a 140 at one time. He didn't accomplish much at welterweight though when he moved up. You know, all the top, you know, he did become champion, but you know, all his top elite fights he lost. So did Sean Porter. So, you know, we'll see. But there's no guarantee that any of these guys are Hall of Famers. I mean, at the end of the day, Errol Spence fought Kell Brook after Kell Brook came off of a loss. Okay, against Golovkin at middleweight. Then his next fight was against, you know, Mikey Garcia, who moved up from 140 to escape Terence Crawford. Okay. And I mean, who moved up from a lightweight actually to because he probably didn't want to face Lomachenko. But you know, Errol Spence fought Sean Porter after Sean Porter already lost a couple of times already. He lost to Book, he lost to Thurman. So I mean, it's not like he fought Sean Porter when Sean Porter was undefeated. It's the same thing with Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia already lost to Sean Porter. That's the guy he fought after he fought Sean Porter. So he keep fighting guys who lost to the guys he fight before. Okay? He fought Porter after Porter lost to Book and Thurman. He fought Danny Garcia after Danny Garcia lost to Thurman and Sean Porter. And now he's getting ready to fight Ugas, who lost to Sean Porter. So, I mean, you know, there's this myth going around about, you know, these so-called top fighters and the PBC at welterweight, you know, as if to say that these guys, I mean, yeah, these guys have more name recognition than the fighters that Terence Crawford has fought, but that doesn't mean they're any better than the fighters that Terence Crawford fought. Just because you're more known doesn't mean you're better. The two don't go together necessarily. Okay, so these are the kind of, you know, silliness that we're hearing from these PBC guys and these LDBC, you know, fanboys. Oh, nobody knows the fighters that Crawford have fought. Nobody ever heard of them. Well, maybe the casual fan haven't heard of them, but people in boxing have heard of them. Okay. So, I mean, you know, and just because these guys are not necessarily as known as a Sean Porter or a Danny Garcia, doesn't mean that they're any worse than Danny Garcia or Sean Porter. It doesn't mean that they're not better than Danny Garcia or Sean Porter. I mean, let's take, for example, Ugas is now the champion, at WBA champion. He fought a guy called Thomas Delorme recently. As a matter of fact, he's in the same camp as Thomas Delorme now. They're stablemates now. But he went the distance with Thomas Delorme. Okay? And a tough fight. Nobody really ever heard of Thomas Delorme. I mean, if you was to ask the casual fan, you know, out there, these are one, nobody really knows about Thomas Delorme, but he fought Crawford. He's one of the guys that Crawford fought to become undisputed at 140 pounds. Okay? Nobody really ever heard of him, but here it is that he just went 12 tough rounds and went the distance against Ugas. Crawford knocked him out in 6 rounds. Stopped him in 6 rounds, but he just went the distance in a tough fight, almost beat Ugas. So a lot of these guys that Crawford fight are top fighters, but they haven't had a chance. They haven't fought any of the PBC guys. Okay, so we don't know how they would do against the PBC guys. The fact of the matter is that all these PBC guys do fight each other. They don't really fight anybody. They got this round robin going on where they're fighting amongst themselves. They're not really fighting anybody else to test themselves or to see, you know, we don't really know how good any of these guys really are. They definitely don't want to fight Crawford, none of them. Okay, you see all the excuses they're making to fight. I mean, you know, and the next thing, you know, people they're out there talking about, oh, why doesn't this? I mean, this guy at Blue Blood Sports is really thick. You know what I'm saying? This guy's a thick guy, man. He's out there talking about. I mean, he's just so full of. Either he's stupid, or he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But I don't think he's stupid. Okay, I think he's just playing games, running narratives. Okay, I mean, I don't know if, you know, I mean, he's trying to make $1, I guess. But anyway, he's out there talking about, oh, why doesn't Crawford make the fight with Sean Porter? How he made the fight with Kovalakis, you know, Aegis Kovalakis. He made the fight with him. Okay, why can't he just make the fight with Sean Porter? Make the fight. I mean, what is this guy talking about? No, he's not stopping the fight. He's not stopping the fight with Sean Porter. The fight was made with Kovalakis. Let's look at the difference between the Aegis Kovalakis, the Mean Machine, and Sean Porter, and what the difference is and why this fight is not happening between Sean Porter and Crawford. Okay? And why it happened between the Mean Machine and Crawford. Why the fight actually went ahead. The difference is that when Kovalakis became the mandatory for Crawford, he activated the mandatory and took the fight. Okay? Simple as that. That's all he did. He just activated the mandatory and he took the fight with Crawford. That's why the fight happened. Up to this day, Porter is still talking about fighting Terence Crawford, but he hasn't activated the mandatory yet. So how can the fight happen if Sean Porter is not activating the mandatory? You can't expect Terence Crawford to activate the mandatory for Sean Porter. He's not Sean Porter's manager. What the hell is this guy talking about? That Crawford should make the fight happen. He had nothing to do with making the fight happen. He's the champion. Sean Porter is the mandatory. If Sean Porter wants to fight him, Sean Porter have to activate the mandatory and make the fight happen and stop talking about, stop talking this foolishness about lowballing and making excuses. Now we hear Sean Porter talking about he directed his father to activate the mandatory. No, he didn't even say that. He directed his father to tell him that's the fight he wants. He wants the Crawford fight. Well, if you want the Crawford fight, activate the mandatory and stop talking nonsense and stop making excuses about lowballing. Okay? If you really want to fight. Crawford can't activate the mandatory for Porter. It's stupidity to even talk about why isn't Crawford making the fight. These guys, I don't know what to say. Okay? But, Sean Porter is out there, pulling publicity stunts and talking and trying to crowd chase. He's not really trying to make this fight with Crawford, because if he did, he would have activated the mandatory a long time ago, but he's not done that yet. Okay? And now we hear him talk about, he told his father, well, That's the fight I want for my legacy. I don't know. All I can say is this. We know that there's nothing over there at PBC for Sean Porter right now, which is why he's, again, talking about Terence Crawford after he already said he's not going to take $1 million. Okay, where's he going to get $1 million over at the PBC for any fight? Who is he going to fight to make $1 million at PBC? Who can he fight now? Where's the fight that PBC has for Sean Porter right now? It's not going to be Errol Spence. Errol Spence is getting ready to supposedly fight Ugas. That's the fight he's looking at. He's not looking at Sean Porter. And even though Sean Porter is mandatory for Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, he can't force Errol Spence to fight him, because if Errol Spence is going to fight a unification, then he could not fight the mandatory. He can avoid a mandatory. That's one of the only ways you can avoid a mandatory is by making a unification fight. So forget about fighting Errol Spence for Sean Porter. There's no fight there for him. So without that fight, what other fight does he have over there at PBC? There's nothing over there for him. Okay? So the only way he's going to make any money is to make a fight with Terence Crawford. If he really wants to make that fight, that's about the only option he had. He had no other option, which is why he's out there talking about, okay, yeah, let's make the fight. Tell his dad to go ahead and he's telling Al Heyman that he wants to fight with Terence Crawford. Well, if you really wanted to fight with Terence Crawford, you'd have talked to your dad and you'd have talked to Al Heyman months ago, but you haven't done that. Okay? A couple of months ago on his podcast, a couple of weeks ago on his podcast, Sean Porter said that his dad hadn't even talked to Al Heyman yet about the fight with Crawford, and that he asked his dad about this, activating, this mandatory, and his dad said, he'll see about it. So they haven't even activated the mandatory yet, according to Sean Porter's own words. But he's still talking about this fight with Crawford, and you got people out there talking about why isn't Crawford making the fight with Sean Porter? It has nothing to do with Crawford, and everything to do with Sean Porter. He's just talking, and he's not making the fight. That's why the fight is not happening. We already heard what Crawford had to say. Make the fight, activate the mandatory, and I'll stop you. That's all you got to do. You don't have to do anything else. Everything else is up to Sean Porter. But as usual, talk is cheap, and so he's just talking and talking and talking. Okay, but at some point, the rubber gonna have to meet the road. Okay, and he's gonna have to either put up or shut up. Okay, so that's where it's at with Sean Porter and Terence Crawford. Sean Porter have to put up or shut up. Okay, so we'll see what happened with that. So as we, right now it looks like Errol Spence, has found a convenient, has found another, he's been saved again. Ugas came along with this belt, so now he can duck Crawford some more, okay, and chase a fight with Ugas, which he's chasing with both hands right now, both hands and both feet. He's running like a madman after Ugas. Like I said, no talk about 60-40, no talk about, 70-30, okay? No talk about he's the pay-per-view champ. None of that talk. We don't hear none of it. He just wants to fight, which is what it should have been with Crawford, but we don't see that. But again, like I said, we'll see what happened with the fight. If the fight is made, and we're going to see if, he actually wins the fight. I mean, it would be funny, like I said before, if he took this fight with Ugas and ended up losing his belts, to Ugas for less money than he would have made against Crawford. Life got a funny way of happening sometimes. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay, if that's but by all means, he should win the fight. Okay. So Ugas, seems to be a great guy. I got nothing against Ugas, okay? I mean, he looked like a stand-up guy, okay? He's ready to fight whoever, okay? So, it looked like he might end up fighting Spence, okay? We don't know if that's going to actually, how that's going to actually play out, but we'll see if it actually happens, okay? and may the best man win. Okay, so it is what it is. So now, as for Crawford and Porter, I guess at some point Porter is going to stop just talking and decide to actually make the fight. It looks like this might, it might just happen because of what happened with Ugas, because now that door over there with Spence for Crawford for Sean Porter is closed now, so he has no other choice. He's not going to get in the fight this year, more than likely, unless he fights Crawford or move up to 154. And who do you have up there for him to fight? Really, there's only two guys up there if you want to get a title, and that's Jermell Charlo and Teixeira. Teixeira is getting ready to fight Castano in February. As a matter of fact, that's going to be next week sometime. Okay, that fight is coming up very closely. The 13th, I believe. So after whoever wins that fight is going to be undisputed. Okay, and Teixeira is fighting Castano. And then if the winner of that fight fights Jermell Charlo, they'll become undisputed. Now, let's just say Ugas loses to Errol Spence. A lot of people think that that's going to get the Crawford fight closer to happening, because there's no other, Errol Spence have nowhere else to go but to fight Crawford. I'm not that optimistic about that. I don't think Errol Spence has any intention of fighting Crawford if he becomes the 3-time champion. I think he'll just be satisfied with the WBA belt, the WBC, and the IBF belt, and he won't go after Crawford at all for that WBO belt. I don't think he'll go after him. I think he'll just stay with the he'll just be satisfied with being a unified champ as opposed to becoming undisputed, and he'll probably just sit around and wait for Crawford to either move up or maybe some lose the belt with in another fight, and then he'll try to get the belt after that. But I don't think he's going to fight Crawford under any circumstances at this point in time. I don't see Errol Spence fighting Crawford at all. He doesn't want to fight with Crawford, and adding another belt is not going to make him want to fight more. I don't think so. Okay, that's what I believe based on his actions right now. Okay. And all the excuses he's making about fighting Crawford. He's just going to come up with another excuse not to fight Crawford if he gets the third belt. I don't see the fight happening, just because he has another belt. I just don't see why people think that he's going to fight Crawford, because I already heard his trainer, Derek James, talk about they want the 3 belts. So once he gets the 3 belts, if he gets the 3 belts, he's going to be satisfied with the 3 belts. He's not going to go after Crawford. And this talk about if he gets the 3 belt, then it's going to be 70-30. It's really going to be 70. I don't understand that. What kind of logic is that? That's not going to make Crawford change his mind about the 50-50. Okay, I mean, because at that point he has more leverage, because if Spence wants to become undisputed, he has to fight Crawford. Okay, so there's no other way around that. So how would that make him have less leverage if Errol Spence have no choice but to fight him to become undisputed? So, we'll see. And again, it's the same with Ugas. You're going to tell Ugas that you want 60-40 to fight Ugas. Ugas can just say, nah, that's okay. I want 50-50. So if you're going to fight me for this belt, it's going to have to be a 50-50 fight. So what is Spence going to do? Go and fight Crawford instead? No, we know that's not going to happen. He wants no part of Crawford. So he's going to have to fight. If Ugas stick to his guns, he's going to have to be a 50-50 fight between Ugas and Spence, because that's the only way Spence is going to get the other belt, because he's definitely not going to get the other belt from Crawford, as we already see. He doesn't want to even go that route. Okay? So that's why you're not hearing him talk about 60-40 with Ugas, because he actually wants to fight with Ugas. When you don't want to fight with the opponent, you say 60-40 or 70-30. He doesn't want to fight with Crawford, so he's talking about 60-40, 70-30, whatever we decide to give him. I'm the pay-per-view champ. But like I said, people, when we look at fights from back in the days, Leonard Hearns, Hagler, Hearns, Leonard Duran, Does anybody look up the pay-per-view numbers? Do we care who had the biggest pay-per-view fight back then? Is that part of the the reason why we want to watch the fight between a Hagler and a Hearns? Who cares about who had the? Do we care if Hearns had the biggest pay-per-view than Hagler before they fought? Do we actually care about that? No. When they start picking people for the Hall of Fame, are they going to say, oh well, it looked like Leonard had the most pay-per-view? No, that being a pay-per-view so-called star is not a criteria for being in the Hall of Fame. So what is this, preoccupation with pay-per-view numbers? But again, I just think it's just another ducking technique for as far as I'm concerned. And at this point in time, these Errol Spence fans will use any and every reason, to try and duck the fight with Terence Crawford. And that's currently that's the only thing they have right now is this whole talk about pay-per-view numbers and being a pay-per-view star. Okay, and at the end of the day, Errol Spence's pay-per-view numbers, are far from spectacular. Okay, that's at the end of the day. I mean, I don't hear Crawford talking about pay-per-view numbers. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Okay, pay-per-view numbers don't really matter. Except for pay-per-view fans coming out. I mean, for all the so-called Spence being a pay-per-view star, we don't see his pay-per-view numbers being that high, except when he's matched with a particular opponent. So the pay-per-view numbers matter depending on who you're matched with. Okay, so this is the reason why a fight with Crawford and Spence will do well on pay-per-view, because of the matchup. It's because of the intrigue of the matchup itself. That's what's going to generate the pay-per-view numbers. Okay, so it is what it is. But as we all know, Errol Spence don't want that fight, even though he will make a lot more money than any other fight that he could make out there right now. Okay, so it is what it is, people. So again, we're gonna see what happens with this Ugas fight and Errol Spence. We'll see if this fight actually happens anytime soon. We're gonna see what Spence is gonna do if he wins the Ugas fight. He better hopes he win that fight, because if he loses against Ugas, he's out of the picture. Okay, and Ugas will go on to make the big money against Crawford, because I'm sure Ugas is not going to have any problem fighting Crawford, for the undisputed. I mean, he looked like a guy who's about legacy, as opposed to just trying to make a quick buck. Okay, like Spence seems to be about, or maybe Spence don't really. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe he's not just about trying to make a quick buck, but it's just that, he just doesn't think he can beat Crawford, so he doesn't want to fight him. And that's I can understand that at the end of the day, that's something I can understand. I mean, that's not hard to understand at all. So it is what it is, people. But I just want to throw that out there, for all these fanboys out there talking about pay-per-view numbers, and as if to say that's some kind of criteria for a fighter being great, or it's gonna be something in a fighter's legacy about the pay-per-view numbers. I mean I can see if these guys were talking about pay-per-view numbers like what like Mayweather was doing, 4 million pay-per-view numbers with Manny Pacquiao, 4 million with McGregor. Yeah, then we can say, okay, that's when you talk about those kind of pay-per-view numbers, you talk about dollars. Okay, but the little pay-per-view that Errol Spence is making, 200,000 pay-per-view. I mean, come on, people, let's get real. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. This is TBE Boxing. That's all I have for right now. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel to get the latest unboxing commentary. That's all I have for right now. I'm out.